One day I was sitting with my friend John. John has been my friend since school. By the way, my name is Edgar. We were having dinner when we remembered school and started talking more about the matter. Our school was a boarding school where we stayed throughout the school year and went home at vacations only. We used to remember those stories and laugh so hard. Suddenly, John started telling me a very strange story. John said, when we were at school, specifically in September 1870, the school was old and very large. It had more than one building for classrooms, and behind those buildings there was a large building containing the students' and teachers' rooms. Every 2 students shared a room, while each teacher had one room. The rules were strict in the school. Study hours were sacred, and no student was allowed to be late for classes. We would wake up early in the morning to have breakfast in the same building as the rooms. After breakfast, we would head to the other buildings where the classes were. Each class had its own schedule. With it, every student must go to the specified class without wasting time, and between each class period there are 5 minutes during which students can move and are allowed to enter the restrooms. After the end of the school day, the students go to the library to study and then to the restaurant in the building designated for the night, where everyone eats lunch. The students sit at tables, and there is a large table designated for teachers that students are not allowed to sit on. After eating lunch, students can go to the library that open again, but after obtaining permission from the overnight supervisor. The library closes its doors at 7 in the evening so that the students return to their rooms again. Students are not allowed to move outside after 8 in the evening, and each student must stick to his room and only leave it in the morning for breakfast. The school was built many years ago. I do not know the exact number, but it is definitely more than 100 years. It had many remote places where we used to hide during our free time, and those places were forbidden to the students. But this did not prevent the students from going there and spending time. We often felt afraid at school, especially at night, as there were many rumors exchanged by students about the school and the incidents that happened there. One time, it was rumored that a student killed another student and buried him behind the dormitory building, which made many students afraid to move to that area. There are those who say that there was a girl who entered the school pretending to be a boy, and when the students discovered that she was in fact a girl, they chased her and assaulted her. She died because of fear, and the ghost of that girl appears from time to time to frighten the students because she is still angry about what happened to her and wants revenge. As for the rumor that I never believed, it was that there was a ghost wandering the corridors of the dormitory building and coming out between the rooms on a daily basis and attacking any student who left their rooms. I knew that the school was behind this rumor because they wanted to ensure that the students remained in their rooms after 8 o'clock, and therefore this rumor was spread in order to limit the students' exit, especially since there were many students who were accustomed to escaping from their rooms and going to gather together in one room, and this behavior the administration tried a lot to limit, but they weren't able to easily, and after repeating the matter more than once, this rumor began to spread. No one knows its source, and it also seems that no one believes it, because the students were constantly breaking the law of not roaming after 8 p.m. At that time, the school year had begun about a month ago, and my friend McLeod, a Scottish national, was sharing the room with me. Because of the size of our school, there were many teachers who were constantly changing. At this time, we had a new teacher called Mr. Simpson, and he was teaching us the Latin language. He was a good teacher. He used new teaching methods. He was tall, pale, and had a distinctive black beard. But he was very popular with all the students because at the end of every class, he used to tell us some stories about his travels that he took in many countries around the world. One time he told us that during his trip to Turkey, he found a strange gold coin. Mr. Simpson asked many people to know the origin of that coin, but no one recognized it. The coin was in good condition, and Mr. Simpson allowed us to look at it closely. It was a beautiful gold coin. I looked at it intently and noticed that on one side of it, there was a picture of the head of a king. I do not know the name of this king, and on the other side there were letters. GWS, and the date below is the 24th of July, 1865. Mr. Simpson's lessons were fun, and we were impatiently waiting for his classes because he used to push us to be innovative. He would often ask us to write innovative sentences of our own and not repeat the same sentences in the grammar book because they were boring and not innovative. We loved this exercise very much. One day, Mr. Simpson told us to use the word remember in sentence. Immediately, each of the students began writing, but McLeod was the only one not writing. It seemed that he was thinking of a sentence but could not find one. Meanwhile, Mr. Simpson was passing by the students to see what each of them had written. McLeod was the last student whose sentence Mr. Simpson would see. Mr. Simpson approached McLeod's table, and then McLeod began writing very quickly. Finally, Mr. Simpson arrived at McLeod's table and asked to see McLeod's sentence. McLeod handed him the paper on which he wrote his sentence. Mr. Simpson looked at the sentence that McLeod wrote for a long time, to the point that the class ended and the students left the class, and only Mr. Simpson and McLeod remained. I waited outside the classroom thinking that McLeod was in trouble. Maybe he made a mistake. McLeod came out after a while and I asked him, "What happened? Was Mr. Simpson angry?" "No," McLeod replied. "He just stared fearfully at the sentence I wrote and then told me to get out." "What did you write?" I asked. "I wrote memento puttae inter quatuor taxos," I asked. McLeod said, "The truth is, it's a funny story. I don't really know." I waited a long time, thinking of a suitable sentence, but I couldn't write anything. Seconds before Mr. Simpson arrived, those words came to my mind out of nowhere. It was very strange, but I saw a picture in my mind and I just wrote down what I saw. I asked him with interest, "And what is that picture?" McLeod said, "It was a picture of a well between 4 trees, so I wrote, memento puttae inter quatuor taxos. Remember the well between the 4 trees." McLeod continued. Mr. Simpson read this sentence and stood staring for a few minutes, and then he started asking me strange questions about my family and where I came from, and then he asked me to come out. McLeod and I did not understand exactly what happened, but as the days passed, we completely forgot that story, especially since the next day, McLeod caught a strange cold and was unable to come to school for a week. A whole month passed after McLeod returned to school, and one day we were also in Mr. Simpson's class when he asked us to write Latin sentences. Each student wrote one sentence on a piece of paper and handed it to Mr. Simpson's desk. The number of students in the class was only 16. Each of us did what Mr. Simpson ordered, and after everyone finished and delivered the papers to Mr. Simpson's desk, immediately Mr. Simpson began checking the papers one by one until he grabbed a paper and looked at it, and he was clearly shown signs of fear and panic, to the point that his color turned white and he screamed in fear. Then he got up and hurried out of the classroom. The students all sat in a state of astonishment and curiosity. We do not know what happened, but the students began to leave the class one by one. I waited until everyone left the class and went to Mr. Simpson's desk and grabbed the paper. I found the last paper that Mr. Simpson was holding before he left. He came out of the classroom and it was written on it, "Si tu non veneris ad me, ego veniam ad te," which means if you do not come to me, I will come to you. Despite the strangeness of the sentence, there was something else suspicious about that paper, which is that it was written in red. At that time, one of the school rules was that students were prohibited from writing in red. This rule was important, and everyone applied it without exception. I do not know why I felt the desire to count the papers on Mr. Simpson's desk, but I found that there were 17 papers. The class number is 16 students, so where did that 17th paper come from? I left the paper on Mr. Simpson's desk and left, and then I saw Mr. Simpson returning to the class again. I stood up to see what would happen. Then Mr. Simpson grabbed the paper again, but he looked worried and surprised, as if he did not understand what was happening. He sat with his hand on his head as if he felt pain, and then he suddenly got up, and then he picked up his bag and left the class. So I went back inside and grabbed the papers again. There were 17 of them as they were, but the paper that was written on it in red was completely blank. It was white and had nothing on it except Mr. Simpson's sweaty fingerprints. This day ended without explanation, but I began to focus on Mr. Simpson, who the next day seemed distracted, pale and anxious, as if he was waiting for something. He looked around as if someone was watching him, or that he was afraid someone might attack him. On the 3rd day, Mr. Simpson was completely normal. He was talking to the students, telling some of his entertaining stories, asking us to have simple conversations in Latin, and his class was fun as always. But on this same day, I was woken up by McLeod, who was very scared. At that time, McLeod shared a room with me. It was almost midnight, and I did not understand why McLeod was waking me up at this time. I looked at him in surprise and could not speak a single word when McLeod said to me while shouting, "Quickly, I think there is a thief trying to enter Mr. Simpson's room." He was then pointing to the window. I immediately stood up and headed to the window. McLeod's face was terrifying, but I couldn't see anything, and yet I had a bad feeling that something was wrong. McLeod and I waited together to see what was happening outside, but we did not see anything. After some time, I looked at McLeod and said, "Tell me exactly what you saw or heard." McLeod said to me, "I didn't hear anything, but 5 minutes before I woke you up, I found myself standing in front of the window." Then McLeod lowered his voice and continued his speech. "There was a terrible man standing in front of Mr. Simpson's window, as if asking him to come out to him. He was a strange person, very tall and thin. He did not seem to me like he was alive at all. He was like a ghost. That's all I saw. And then I went to wake you up." We were both feeling anxious and afraid, so we stood until the beginning or a ray of light in the sky in front of the window, watching what was happening outside. But everything was completely calm. We only slept for 2 hours that night, so we woke up feeling tired and strange in the morning. During the school day, a strange rumor spread throughout the school. The students were sure that Mr. Simpson was missing, and no one at school found him, but his things were still in his room. I tried to reassure McLeod that it was probably just a rumor. We waited for Mr. Simpson's language class that day, but he did not enter the class that day. In fact, we had not seen Mr. Simpson since that time. We both knew that something terrifying had happened to him, and that is why we decided to keep quiet and not tell anyone at school about what McLeod had seen that night. I believe the school locked Mr. Simpson's room with his belongings, which were not claimed by him or anyone in his family. McLeod and I would stay up every night trying to understand what had happened and why Mr. Simpson had disappeared in that way. We asked ourselves if McLeod was asleep. Maybe he was dreaming, but he would swear that it was not a dream and it was real to him. Each of us tried to talk to the professors, but everyone. They were keeping the matter secret in an interesting way. Within 1 week, a new teacher came to teach us the Latin language, and we also tried with him so that he might know anything about Mr. Simpson, but he seemed not to know anything about him. Unfortunately, as time passed, we forgot about the matter and did not try again to find out anything, but there was something inside us telling us that something was wrong with Mr. Simpson and his disappearance was never a normal thing. The Latin teacher continued at the school, and unfortunately, his classes were not as entertaining or exciting as Mr. Simpson's classes, but we had no other choice. John finished his story, and I was listening to him and taking a little wine from my cup. I said to him, "It is a very good story, John, a very good story, but I must go home now, and I hope I do not meet any strange, thin, long men on my way home." We both laughed. We shook hands, and each of us went home. My mind did not stop thinking about that story the entire way back home. I don't know why I felt that John was being honest in what he said, but all logical calculations confirmed that what he said could not be true. More than 10 years have passed since I heard that story, but I have not been able to forget it or even confirm whether it was real or made by John. But it is definitely an exciting and strange story. I do not know why, but I tend to believe that it is a true story. I know that school, and I know that many unbelievable things happened there, strange and unnatural things, but everyone preferred to remain silent and not talk about it. I did not attend any class with Mr. Simpson, and I do not remember his appearance clearly, but I do not know why that story stuck in my memory. I thought about it for years, and many times I made sure to search in the books I read in order to find an explanation for that incident, but I did not find it. I made sure to mention Mr. Simpson's name in front of a number of friends who were with me and John in the same school. Most of them knew Mr. Simpson and remembered his exciting stories, and most of them concluded their talk about him by saying that they missed him very much when he left school without returning. I remember that one of them said that there was a rumor that was raised at this time that Mr. Simpson had been kidnapped, but he also said that that period witnessed many rumors that could not be true, such as the rumor of a ghost wandering between students' rooms. At that time, he laughed hard because he was one of those who believed that rumor, and he said that because that rumor, he missed a lot of fun among friends. On one of my trips, I was traveling to a friend of mine who lived in Ireland. He lived in a country house there, and this friend of mine loved adventures, and he collected strange things. We started exchanging stories, and then he told me that he had a box containing those strange things. Indeed, he brought his box, which was full of old and strange things. There were things that I saw for the first time in my life, and he briefly told me where he got each piece and how he found them. After some time, he took out a coin and held it. It was a gold coin. He put it in front of me and said to me, "What do you think?" I looked at it, and I felt a shiver that ran through my entire body. I looked at my friend and asked him, "Where did you get this coin?" My friend answered enthusiastically, "Well, it's a very interesting story. 2 years ago, when I bought this house, I made sure to take care of the garden, especially the back garden, which had a special corner. Then he got up from his chair and went to one of the windows and pointed to a specific area with his hand. I turned to him and looked in the direction he pointed. My friend said, "There in the corner, can you see? Between the 4 trees. We found an old well, and inside it you will not guess what we found." So I interrupted him, saying, "Yes, I will guess. Was it a dead body?" My friend looked at me with a look of shock on his face and said, "Yes, indeed. How did you know?" Then he continued, "But it was not one body. We found 2 bodies. One of them had his arms tightly around the other. When I called the doctor, he said that the bodies seemed to have been dead for 30 years or more. We took out the bodies and found that coin was in the pocket of one of the bodies. It was a strange coin that seemed to be from Turkey or somewhere. We knew this from its appearance. Wait to see the other side of it." I said to him, "Is it written GWS and the date July 24th, 1865? He was shocked. We went back to sit down, and my friend tried to find out where I got all this information and how I knew what was written on the gold coin, but I was keen to change the subject and draw his attention to other matters. Only then did I become certain that John's story was true, and it wasn't a story made by his imagination. I was supposed to stay with my friend for a week, but I was only able to complete 3 days. I wake up every day at precisely midnight to the sounds of 2 people arguing. They were 2 men arguing together in a strange language. I stood up and started looking for the source of the sound. I find it came from outside. I run to the window to see what is happening. I find 2 people. One of them is tall and pale and has a distinctive black beard, and the other is very tall and very thin. He does not seem to be alive. He looked like a ghost. The argument continues between the 2 men until the strange man embraces the other man between his arms and jumps with him into the well. I don't know if what I saw every day since I arrived at my friend's house was true, or if it was just my mind manipulating me. I could not bear it and said goodbye to my friend after I promised him I would come back again, and left for my house. I didn't tell anyone anything. Since I arrived at my house, I had not seen anything of what I saw or heard at my friend's house, and I tried hard to forget the story of John, the shape of the coin, and the 2 men at the well, but I could not. Months passed, and I was unable to fulfill my promise to my friend. In fact, I did not even try or think about going back there again. It was a difficult and frightening experience, and I did not want to try it again, until the day the doorbell rang at my house, and I went to open it. At the door, I found my friend in front of me. He had come from Ireland. He had a strange appearance. He had lost a lot of weight and was clearly insomniac. He sat in front of me and asked me to be honest with him and tell him why I left his house in the middle of the trip and never came back again. I did not understand. Did he come from his home in Ireland to my house to ask me this question? So I asked him, was he joking or what? He told me then that he was not joking. He just wanted to make sure of something. Then I told him that I did not feel comfortable at home and could not continue the trip. So he asked me, "Did you see the 2 men at the well?" I felt shocked, and I realized then that my mind was not playing with me as I thought, but it was real. I actually saw the 2 people arguing at the well. Signs of shock appeared on my face, and I was unable to answer for several seconds. So my friend repeated the question, wanting to know. I said to him, "Yes, I saw the 2 men, but how did you know?" My friend started telling me that one of his relatives visited him at his house 2 weeks after I left, and he was unable to sleep for a single moment after he saw the 2 men arguing. Then one of them grabbed the other and jumped into the well. My relative ran into my room and was screaming at the top of his lungs for someone to hurry and save the 2 men. I did not understand what he meant at first, but then I told him that it must be a dream, and there was no one with that description. The next day, it happened again, and my relative decided to leave immediately. And then I started asking myself, what happens to every person who comes to the house and stays in that room, facing the well? The next day, I decided to sleep in the room to see what was happening, and I saw the 2 men arguing and holding each other and jumping into the well. What was terrifying to me was that the bodies we had taken out of the well were in this same position. My friend completely collapsed, especially after he assured me that he had asked a lot of people about this matter, and no one was able to answer it. Now I am sitting in front of him after he calmed down and fell asleep. I do not know whether to tell him what I know or to hide it from him.